closing government we have WSCCSS, and on closing opposition we have WSCCNN. On the motion about addressing gender binary in the transgender movement, I have to call on Prime Minister to start the meeting.
What?
Is that it's mine, your matter.
What I'm asking, right?
For far too long, transgender people have lived with the chain of gender conformity around their neck. The worst thing we can do is to put another chain, this time of binary gender, around them. Few things we're going to do in this debate. First off, I'm going to give you the standards as to educate this debate. Next, I'm going to tell you what we support and what we're against, and finally bring you two arguments. Firstly, what's the purpose of a transgender movement? And secondly, how will this negatively affect the efficiency of the transgender movement? Standards. There are three standards that opening government wants to bring to this debate. First off, what's the purpose of a transgender movement? Secondly, how does this affect the power of the transgender movement? And thirdly, how does this affect the members of the movement? What do we support? We support people doing what they want. We support people subscribing to characteristics that they want to subscribe. But what we are against is the attachment of said characteristics to gender. In explanation, we are okay with you wanting to be more masculine or more feminine, but just not okay with you wanting to be more masculine because you are male, or wanting to be more feminine because you are female. We're okay with you embracing whatever characteristics, including characteristics of traditionally cisgender individuals, but we are not okay with you attaching those characteristics to gender. Before we move on, sure.
So does that mean like if someone just doesn't call themselves female but like transforms into a female and like wears makeup and all that, you'll still be gonna space still be a movement?
As long as they don't identify themselves as long as they don't attribute those characteristics to being female. So we're okay if you wanting to put on makeup, as long as you don't explicitly say that I'm forced to put on makeup because it is what society expects of a cisgendered female. We're okay with that. So moving on to my arguments. But firstly, what is the purpose of the transgender movement? The transgender movement was formed during times of oppression and exclusion. People that do not conform to traditional societal standards of what it means to be a male or female were excluded from the society narrative of being human. And therefore, the transgender movement was born to help these individuals. So we'll argue that it's principally in line for a movement that is designed to fight exclusivity to be as inclusive as possible. Therefore, we find a huge principal contradiction in such a movement only using exclusive traits, not to say traits that belong to the people, the very people who oppress them, have the seat, the very people that oppress them in the first place, to use those traits as the face of their movement. Therefore, we argue that the transgender movement should be exclusive at people, and this includes transgender people who do not subscribe to any gender at all. They just want to, they subscribe to characteristics that do not belong to the male or female, or both at once. We are okay with these individuals, and we believe that these individuals are the individuals that suffer the most under the oppressive regime of society. Therefore, we say that two outcomes that will happen when your movement is exclusive. Firstly, money and aid that the transgender movement have will be redirected to causes that only suit individuals who conform to cisgender narrative. Now, I should have a seat. I was going to say that. And this is, secondly, societal discourse around transgender individuals will largely be focused around how they should conform towards binary gender status. Have a seat. And this is very harmful. Why? Because firstly, individuals will have, I'm going to tackle this harm from two aspects. Firstly, people who conform, and secondly, people who don't. Firstly, about people who actually conform to binary gender status. This is horrible for a few reasons. Imagine being born in a male body, but not subscribing to what society expects of you. Now, not only do you have to live with decades of oppression and people telling you that you can just change your mindset, the very people who reach out the hand of aid will be the same people that tell you that you should also conform to the very standards that you have been oppressed to. What will this lead to? This lead to a few things. Number one, people who conform will face an imposter syndrome, identity crisis and imposter syndrome. Why? Because these individuals will feel that they don't belong to the very movement that they join. These individuals will feel that the identity that they are forced to embrace doesn't truly represent them. Have a seat. And this is especially harmful in the context of a transgender movement because any acceptance that these individuals have will be laced with a degree of uncertainty, will be laced with a veil that I couldn't be accepted for who I was before. Now I have to adopt another identity that I don't agree with in order to get any form of acceptance. And this is a double blow. Because after centuries of being rejected, after decades of being rejected and feeling that they do not have a place to belong, the very place that gives them some form of acceptance, the very movement that gives them some form of some place to call home, will also be the place that rejects them for the second time. And this is especially harmful because whatever acceptance they get, they won't feel happy with acceptance. They won't feel like they belong, and that's harmful. Have a seat. The second harm of people who don't conform. So people who don't conform to these standards will get off even worse because they'll be cut off from any form of aid. So the counselors that they go to when they have identity crisis will tell them that you're ungrateful and you have to change towards the other side. Because if you reject our aid, reject the aid of the transgender movement, you'll be branded as ungrateful. You'll be branded as rejecting the very people that want to help you. You'll also be shunned by other movements of the transgender society. And that's especially harmful because these individuals are the most vulnerable part of the community itself. And if we reject the most vulnerable part of community, then why do we exist as a movement that is supposed to help individuals? Second argument on how this fractures the transgender movement. So in that world where when people only use the face of people who conform to a gender binary as the face of transgender movement, there will be splinter movements. People who do not feel that they belong in the main movement will come up with a fractured movement and come up with their own movements about people who do not subscribe to the gender binary standards. This will cause the aid that is the already very limited aid that goes towards this movement to be fractured. Therefore, your school outreach programs are less likely to go to far-off communities that really need this exposure. Your counselors will likely be people will likely be taught with different counselors who give different advice. They cannot get the best advice that they want, and this is the harms of a fractured community. It doesn't offer the infinite possibilities possible. The transgender movement holds the key to free the chain of oppressions from the neck of these poor individuals. Let's do that for once.
I thank Prime Minister for your speech and call for the leader of opposition. from the set.
This debate is very confusing. I'm going to spend the first few minutes of my speech explaining what the burden of opening government is in this debate, what the burden of opening opposition is in this debate, and why they weren't able to fulfill that. So what does this world look like? In a world where the face of the transgender movement, or one of the many faces of the transgender movement, was confirmation. Because we told you, confirmation breeds pressure. Even if your choice to conform is your own, it compels other people within the transgender movement to conform as well. Because when more and more people conform to cisgender characteristics, the people who choose not to conform to cisgender characteristics are victims of discrimination. Because confirmation removes yourself from discrimination instead of fighting that discrimination. So instead of fighting the fact that people are abnormal in the eyes of society, people who conform evade discrimination and force other people to conform as well, because the fight shrinks when people conform to cisgender characteristics. In the world of law, when you allow people to conform and force other people to do as well, because confirmation is the only way to escape discrimination, that is when there is no choice for the identity of a transgender person. But then they said, you know, then you're harming people who want to conform. People who want to conform, what happens to their identity? So we had to choose between the people that want to conform and people who don't want to conform. We would obviously choose people who don't want to conform, because the people who conform don't get discrimination on your side. They don't need the movement as much as people who are seen as flamboyant, who are seen as abnormal, who are seen as not binary in society. So maybe we reject people who are binary. Maybe we reject people who conform to societal standards, but they don't get it as much as people who choose to fight against societal standards. So two questions in this debate. What is the role of the transgender movement? And these are issues I'm going to integrate all my responses and positive contribution within them. But secondly, how does this shift the power and the influence of the transgender movement? So what is the role of the movement? We told you from opening government that the transgender movement is a fight against oppression, a fight against isolation. And that fight against oppression only exists when there is no confirmation towards that oppression. So for the people who choose to conform, it is a lost fight, because the individuals who refuse to conform towards cisgender characteristics are likely to be discriminated, which means there's an increasing pressure of conformity that individuals should reject. The transgender movement should reject conformity, because conformity is especially harmful to the identity of people. So what does this conformity look like? It looks like a transgender male being bullied or being victims of hate crime simply because he does not want to be masculine, simply because his interests are not in line with being cisgender. And recognize that opening opposition does not have the ability to fight against these forms of discrimination, because they can't do both. They can't choose to fight against conformity, but at the same time embrace conformity, which is forcing other individuals out of that fight. But the second thing we said is that under this, when the fight decreases, the power against conformity decreases as well. So I'll accept their convenience stance, right? You can have many different fights with the transgender movement, but the funds are split as well. You don't have funds against conformity as well as funds in embracing your own identity as being a transgender individual. We think those funds reach towards counseling, to telling people you don't have to conform. You can be whatever you want as a person. You don't have to be cisgender or appeal to be cisgender. And all that can't happen in OO as much as they want it to happen in opening opposition, because if you accept conformity as one of the faces of the transgender movement, you can't fight against conformity. You can't fight against people who are bullied simply because they can't conform. Even if in OO's stance, where they choose to accept all forms of interpretations of what it means to be transgender, they cannot be conflicting stances between the transgender movement. So if a person is bullied simply because they do not conform, you can't stand up against it. By standing up against it, you're standing up against other people who chose to conform as well. You're standing up against the idea of confirmation. You can't defend people who choose not to conform, at the same time embrace people who are victim to it. I'll take closing.
Okay, yeah, so considering that your transgender movement already has a limited capacity to send a message across, how do you prioritize discussion between transgender-related issues and gender non-binary issues?
So on our side, if we have a clearer stance as to rejecting gender binary traits, that is when we have a proper discussion. Your discussion is watered down. you might receive some support from people because your idea of dealing with gender binary issues is accepting it as well as rejecting it, because on some circumstances you accept people for being gender binary, on other circumstances you tell them they can do whatever they want, but that the effort to represent people from discrimination is reduced. Because if you use the support to fight many battles and defend many viewpoints, the victims of non-confirmation still exist without adequate support. So what we're saying in OG technically is people who conform don't need support. They don't need the support that people who don't conform need. A person who is flamboyant doesn't get the representation of the trans movement, isn't getting enough help, isn't having enough funds, isn't going to get as much help if you compare that and you include other forms of interpretations of confirmation. Second issue, what is the power look? How does it shift the focus and the power of the transgender movement? So what does this money look like? When the transgender movement rejects confirmation on our side, what do? We have a further outreach into many areas and tell people in rejecting confirmation. And that means we're able to provide more adequate help and targeted help. That means our counselors are more specialized in educating people and counseling people who are victims to non-confirmation. Whereas in your side, the counselors and the advocates of the transgender movement cannot do that because they can't represent one without blindsiding the other. They have to be very vague in terms of what they defend to be the transgender movement. So on your side, when you have vague support for the transgender movement, you can't reach out to that child who is victim to being flamboyant. You can't reach out to that transgender female who is being victimized because she's seen as too muscular or too manly. I don't know if that's a trait. Which means if you don't specialize the help that we advocate towards people, you have help that is not needed by people who have already conformed. Every person who is conformed to cis male characteristics doesn't need help. They don't need help on our side because they're conformed towards society and they don't need adequate help. They're not victims of discrimination. They're not victims of bullying. But because you choose to include them in that fight, you have to centralize the fight and make it as vague as possible so as to not hurt people who have conformed. Which means you reduce specialized support towards people who are victims to being gender binary. You reduce specialized support towards people who try to fight the fight. In the end, it's a balance of who to pick. We can't pick everyone because if we pick everyone, we reduce support towards those that need help the most. We would pick people who choose to fight the gender binary fight because these are people that are not accepted by society. These are people that are victims, that are in need of help, that are in need of support.
I think that this practice for speech
first to tell you that we don't necessarily want gender binary conforming transgenders as our faces, nor the other side to be our faces as well. We're rather a neutral way, a neutral face representing everyone and having the best ability to fight for multiple spectrums, not really for those of a certain spectrum. We think that in these circumstances, you are able to relate to both. You are able to relate to both spectrums. Because in status quo, it's inherent that it's only gender binary conforming transgenders who are the faces of the trans movement, and those who relate to the people that conform to that ideology only. It's never really those who don't conform. Hence, we'd rather a neutral face go out and say for both ends of the spectrum, and not simply one that directs all the funds and all the discussion to the gender binary conforming transgender. That's what we mean in context. That couple of responses to OO. We don't regret gender binary conforming transgenders, but we do regret them as being the primary faces and pretty much the only people that talk about things of the trans movement. We think that a lot more people of other transgender identities should come out as well and should talk. That's why we regret it in the first place. So let's look at a couple of things OO want to talk to you. Firstly, the ability to relate is better. We think the reason as to why those who don't conform to gender binary, are not able to be related by society is because firstly, they don't have faces who actively talk out, hence no form of exposure is given to them. This means your level of normalization, your level of acceptance, it will never occur. In your side, when you only have gender binary conforming transgenders, you can talk on behalf of these individuals, but the effectivity and the ability for people to relate to those who don't conform to you is likely to be less. Hence, we take that comparative and we think it's better. We agree. It's going to take some time for people to look at women standing with beards because they were transgender males, but it's better that way. Maybe you do get discriminated in the first place by the point in which people are exposed and say that these are humans, these are people, these are your neighbors. Hence, they are more likely to accept that and more likely to listen to that rather than you bashing and simply saying you have to be pure woman or pure man. But then, let's talk about like what Mbara taught you. You erase a brand. We say we're not erasing a brand. We rather keep it neutral and we rather keep it open to a lot more spectrums. But even if we do erase the brand, I'll take you later. We think the brand in which you erase is the ones that don't necessarily get discriminated. This means some individuals won't directly know that your neighbor is a transgender person, won't directly know that the student in front of you was a transgender person. These are the individuals who directly change and become of the other gender. We're not talking about those who share like similar identities, hence these are individuals who are targeted. So even if we do erase a brand, we erase a brand for those who don't necessarily get as much discrimination. Hence, it's more about who do you prioritize in these circumstances. But lastly, what's the incentive of trans movement to literally make people conform to this ideology? We need to understand that the transgender movement is seen as volatile. They're seen as weird people standing out to change or to fight, all these biological identities. Hence, it's more likely that these faces and leaders want the people within the party to support their cause because we need to be seen as united. That we shouldn't have a lot of spectrums, that we shouldn't have all these different weird ways of living. We should live in a certain way so that even if you do get help, yes, you might conform, you might have to give up some form of your happiness, but still we get all those benefits. We think this is bad. We'd rather many faces talking about many spectrums, and even if help does come less, we think that help is crucial to helping those individuals who prefer to live a different life. Sure.
The motion isn't about prioritizing certain faces but rejecting them. So clarification, you agree that you also want gender binary conforming transgenders as the faces of the movement as well?
We think it's about the use of gender binary conforming transgenders as particularly the greatest faces. What we prefer is a neutral world, not necessarily one that conforms to either ideology, but one that can help both ideologies. Hence, two arguments. Firstly, what's the role of transgender movement, and secondly, how political traction is better. Number one, what's the role of transgender movements? We think they should necessarily prioritize the happiness of people. They should have a balance between gender binary conforming transgenders and those who don't conform. This means the faces that you put out should be neutral and should say that everyone is welcome. There should be a balance of discourse in which that transgender movement exists. But secondly, they should be friendly and they should be inclusive. I've told you why they have the incentive to not be inclusive, is they need to be seen as united. What this means, if I'm a transgender person and I do society says is cisgender, as I'm more likely not going to join your movement, I'm more likely going to bash on it, I'm more likely going to hate on it. You give me more reason to stay positive, to not go out and tell individuals and to exercise what form of happiness I want. No, thank you. Hence, the conclusion is this. We think the transgender movement should be very much neutral and should be open to a lot of faces that can give up better political traction, that can give up better voices for individuals. The comparative is, if you only allow gender binary conforming transgenders as the faces, as people who continuously speak up, will never give these individuals a chance because they won't feel like it's something that's accessible to them. You will never opt in for the movement. Second argument, how is political traction better on our side? On the first level, we need to understand in these circumstances, faces of the transgender movements are more likely going to be diverse. At the point in which it's neutral, at the point in which we have more people being felt accepted and more people being engaging, this means when you have better diversity, people are more likely going to talk about it. People are more likely going to give out new ideas and talk about different things to help these transgender movements. But secondly, and even more importantly, the ability to voice out is greater. We need to understand the idea of bigots existing. Let's take it to the best case scenario where bigots actually do listen to all these transgender people. They are more likely going to listen to gender binary conforming transgenders because that's the face of your transgender movement. Anyone who doesn't conform to that ideology is more likely going to be bashed, more likely going to say your ideas are not legitimate because the faces of your movement do not conform to those ideas. And we think in these circumstances, it's better when you have more faces, when you are neutral at least, or you can have better political traction. In these circumstances, you can get all the benefits OG wanted. You can get all those money, you can get all those funds and all that protection. We need to understand that it's not easy for you to choose sides, but we'd rather in those circumstances be neutral about it and help everyone. Thank you.
I think members are ready for your speech. Now I call on the group opposition you have.
The world that we live in isn't one where we have the resources or the support system to support every single type of transgender person that exists out there. The world that we live in is one where we cannot concentrate on all the issues and win at the same time. I'm going to do two things in my speech today. Firstly, talk about how you make people who do follow gender binaries feel bad about themselves. And secondly, why on our world, the correlation of gender binaries and transgender people happen, meaning that you get worse off counseling, aid, and discussion for both sides. But before that, a few issues with closing government. The first thing they talked about was, first issue, whether or not we have the capacity to fight for two causes at the same time. Firstly, we don't think that this is possible because we think that the correct discussion or the discussion that needs to happen won't happen, because if you bring a new issue in, it means that we have to talk about it. Right now, we don't have the ability to properly discuss even transgenders' rights. So we see that we don't have things like transgender bathrooms for transgender people. We don't think that the world hasn't normalized the idea of transgender people. We don't think adding in another movement will make things any better. But secondly, whether or not we can keep a neutral stance, because they seem to have this idea about how we have the ability to relate to people once we have a neutral face. We think that this is where they were severely wrong in their characterization, right? We don't think that a man who has a beard, who wants to wear a dress, can relate to a person who isn't like him. We don't think that they can relate to a regular transgender person who does conform to gender binaries, right? Even if they could, or in the best case scenario where you say that they feel like they still have a part of a movement to be part of, we don't think that can happen. Because if you're fighting for people who don't conform and people who go against gender binaries, you will lose that fight. Moving on, firstly, how do we make people who then follow gender binaries feel bad about themselves, and why you end up making the fight worse for both sides? Firstly, you force them to compete against each other. We think that we acknowledge that there are two discussions that need to happen and that are very important, but we don't think it can happen at the same time. Here's why. We think that first of all, this is where opening opposition talks about how the world hasn't normalized itself and probably won't normalize itself to all these ideas. We're going to take it further, right? We're going to talk to you about why when you pit these two causes against each other, more discrimination is going to happen and people are going to feel less that they are at home or that they have a support structure to depend on. First thing, why will this happen? We think that it's the nature of people or nature of like society in general to focus on the more controversial thing. Which means that if you are something that's different, or if you are something that's foreign to them, that they don't completely understand, they are more likely to sensationalize you. They are more likely to have more discussions about you, be it good or bad, right? Why is this a bad thing? We think this is when you force people who do conform to gender binaries to get forced out of the fight. This is when you make them feel like they don't have the place to fight because they cannot fight for what they believe in, because the fight that they are fighting isn't one that people want to support. But secondly, you make them feel like they then have to change and like they are being forced into gender binaries that they don't want to be into. This is when you make them question their identity. You tell them that, look, you're only this because this is what society wants you to be, or you cannot be this because society wants you to be this. This is bad because it means, firstly, they never ever have a good support structure. They will never have a place where they can be completely okay with themselves. Because on one hand, you tell them that, oh, you're just conforming to what society wants you to be. Before that, sure.
So closing opposition made all the arguments against opening opposition for why they have to pick a side and support both fights. Given that that is true, why do you choose to not support people who face physical hate and emotional hate against people who conform that might face emotional hate?
See, no, we're not saying that we don't want to support these people, right? We're saying that we don't think a good fight or a good discussion can happen at the same time, because we don't think we think that if it happens at the same time, the discussions won't be right, and that the support for both sides generally will be less. Moving on, where was I? Okay, you tell people that they don't belong. Now, not only do people who conform to gender binaries feel like they are bad or that they are wrong for conforming, you also make people who don't conform, you make them feel even worse for themselves. Because firstly, it isn't the fight that they are fighting for. But moving on. Yeah, sure.
It is the same thing. So all your harms apply to individuals who choose not to conform.
Yeah.
And I already analyzed to you why the harms that individuals who don't choose to conform are far worse than people who choose to conform. Why are you choosing the people who suffer less?
Okay, so that was the first part of my speech. Moving on to the second part of my speech, why we harm people who don't conform even worse. Firstly, we think that you get worse off counseling, right? We don't think that at this point in time, people know enough to differentiate. You get a worse discussion because we don't think it's realistic to say that two comprehensive discussions can happen at the same time. We don't think you can have to try and fight for transgender people who don't conform while fighting for transgender people who do conform at the same time. We don't think it's a discussion. We think it's a discussion that even if it does happen, won't get the amount of support that you could get. Here's why. We think that people are less likely to accept a foreign principle. This is unfortunate and it's horrible. We think that it's highly unlikely for them to accept two versions of something because they already something that they already don't understand. No, thank you. You don't get more aid, which means that when you even if you have these discussions, you don't get more aid. But because people don't choose to opt into what you're supporting. But secondly, you lose supporters that you previously had. People who aren't comfortable or people who aren't normalized with this more extreme idea of transgender people are going for 6 years.
Those people are more relatable, they get more funds, they're able to fight for people who conform towards norms. Why is that a fight worth fighting if you're going to single out the people who choose to fight against those cisgender?
So if we fight this fight first, it means that with all this funding and when people better understand the very basic concept of transgender people, that is when you can move into more complicated things, right? That's when you can tell people about the different types of transgender people that do exist. If they don't accept the basis of the core of it in the first place, we don't think that they're likely to accept it once you move it up a level. So what have I told you in my speech today? Wait, before that, people who aren't comfortable, we don't think that people are going to be comfortable. We don't think that people at this point who aren't normalized to transgender people will ever be normalized to the idea of a different type of transgender people. When you haven't won the fight or when you haven't garnered enough support to fight for the very basics, we don't think it's okay for us to say, look, we can't fight, we're going to choose to fight two separate fights, even if it's completely redundant and doesn't gain anything. We are okay with fighting both the fights. You harm not only people who conform to gender binaries, but you harm people who don't as well.
Thank you very much for the exposition. Government side and common government.
shame that the very people who get victimized every single day, whose self-worth gets delegitimized every single day, have to suffer yet even more misrepresentation by the very movement that was supposed to support them and protect them in the first place. I have two issues for you today. That is, which side better protects the transgenders, and the second issue on the capacity of the fight under both sides and why the fight under our side is a better one. But before that, a clarification. Our alternative is not to have non-binary or transgenders be the faces of the movement, but rather several different neutral faces who accept everyone and tell the rest of society that there may be transgenders that have different types of characteristics, not necessarily cis male or cis female, and we are willing to do that even if it comes at the cost of the length of time it takes to gain acceptance. So now on to my first issue, on which side better protects the transgenders. So side opening opposition came up and said that it was easy for the movement to accept them and that it was easy to push forth a large spectrum of different types of transgenders. The first thing we will say is that this is very likely not to happen, because the transgender movement is already in a volatile state of acceptance, because this whole concept of someone being transgender is already new to a lot of people in society, and they are struggling to accept it. This means that in the eyes of the transgender movement, when you have several different types of transgenders and several different types of transgenders, it makes it harder to be united and to show the rest of the world that that someone being transgender is a legitimate thing. This means that these group of people who don't conform to cis male or cis female characteristics are deemed as potential threats to the leaders and to the face of this to the faces of this movement. At worst, there will be members of this group who discriminate those transgenders that are different and force them to stay closeted so that they don't harm the unity of the transgender movement. But this unity is in actual fact a facade. Behind the facade, there are transgenders who remain shackled and who are still struggling to find their own identity and gain acceptance from society. This is true because acceptance comes with relatability, as closing opposition said. It is a cold hard fact that on a comparative, society is more likely to accept a transgender with cis male or cis female characteristics simply because they are able to relate. To those characteristics better. You make this even. This is even worse when you make those people with cis male or female characteristics the faces of this movement. This means that the leaders of this movement have a natural incentive to make the movement as relatable as possible and to make all transgenders have cis male and female characteristics so that people can relate to them better and therefore gain equality and acceptance better. Yeah.
Can you tell me anything that challenges the gender binary more strongly than a female becoming a conventionally strong, muscular, attractive man?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
When a woman becomes a strong, muscular, attractive man, can you tell me anything that challenges the gender binary more strongly than that?
No, but by fear of the motion, there are different types of transgenders who may be some may be gender binary and some may not be, and we want to protect all of them, not just the gender binary ones.
Yeah.
So everyone in society, so when the faces of the transgender movement become people with only male or female, cis male or female characteristics, everyone in society deems all the transgenders as people who have cis male or female characteristics. This means that those that don't, their identity gets questioned every single day. Because hey, if the face of your movement has those cis male and female characteristics, shouldn't the rest of your movement have those cis male and female characteristics? Therefore, why don't you? This not only means that the movement isn't actually united, but there isn't anyone to back back those non-gender binary conforming transgenders when they get insulted or delegitimized on the streets every day. There's no one to back them up because they don't have representation from the community that was supposed to protect them, and they don't have support from the rest of society. Who do they turn to? And these are the people that your side affects the most. But even at best, if you say that some members of society will be nice and they won't discriminate you, the members of the group who don't get representation feel delegitimized because they don't feel like they are like the faces of the people who are representing their movement, and therefore they aren't legitimate. So now on to the second issue, that is on the capacity of the fight. We concede it may take a longer time to gain acceptance because people aren't used to the fact that there may be different types of transgenders. But whatever acceptance that you get under your side, even if it's in a short period of time, is a facade. So many people are still struggling to be accepted and to gain equality, and that is when your fight becomes pointless. This is what happens when you have only one type of face representing the movement. Under our side, when you have, if your problem to begin with was that the idea of non-cis characteristics was foreign, then our side aims to make it something that's not foreign and in fact relatable, like what Sarah told you. It's better to have several neutral faces so that you can it is better to have several neutral faces so that the rest of society will get exposed to this spectrum of transgenders, and that is when it is better. That is when they are more likely to accept all transgenders under our side, because we normalize it and make it something that's not foreign by exposing the people to it as much as possible. Our side is the side that fights for all types of transgenders and not just one type. We protect all of them, and we make sure that society becomes normalized to it, and we protect those that that feel misrepresented by their own community. With that, go aside, closing up.
There's this debate about the last week of the House.
The progress for normalization and equality is a long and tough fight. In a world where that fight is a supremely uphill battle, we have to pick and choose and strategize the way that we fight these fights. Because while opening, I wanted to talk to you about the principle of a societal movement, and maybe Mubarak hinted in his speech about maybe prioritization. It was in closing opposition that we told you the specific ways that these fights are altered. And in Nimisha's speech, when largely unresponded in closing government, we told you how you harm the capacity for non-binary movement to gain traction. So let's deal with closing government first. Two things. Number one is the ability to relate with these movements better in government's work. We think it's worse off. Why? Because now people feel that transgenders and non-binaries are the same issue. Considering that opening government debated on a premise that people don't have the capacity to understand non-binaries and the nuances between transgenders, they have to concede that when you pile this information to individuals who already don't understand what it means to be a transgender or what it means to be a non-binary person, you're likely to muddle up the issue further. So we think relation is further off there. But we think more importantly, for a lot, considering that they are regretting this issue, for a lot of transgenders, being a feminine or a masculine person is very important to their identity. You are essentially saying that you conform, then you represent the wrong side of transgenders, and you're on the wrong side of that movement. We regret the idea of that happening. On a net, we think people who conform become far worse off in your world. We think it doesn't create relation. We think support is significantly less off. Then before I move on,
So closing opposition chooses to abandon the harder fight and push away the marginalized community. In Mubarak's words.
And in my words, the abandoned community, when it gets stuffed into the transgender movement, does not have the capacity to have that same discussion that they need to have if they don't enter. But I'll talk to you secondly about why political traction for this transgender movement is far worse off. So we think firstly, it's less for two reasons. reasons. Number one, you get conformity, so your movement becomes less inclusive as a result, so less people relate. Secondly, though, I think this is important, and Nimisha's speech brought up that closing government never dealt with it. We think that your funds that you have become now split for a non-binary discussion and for transgender discussion. Here's why. Considering the transgender movement, as it is, have limited capacity to send their message across. So their forums are much shorter, in not as nice places. They have limited airtime because of these limited funds. And considering that they're conceding that the entire government bench is accepting that people don't have the capacity to understand this information, you need to have a lot of discussion on what being a transgender means and what being a non-binary means. So we think that considering the non-binary, the issue of non-binary are further behind in terms of progression than transgender. We need to have more time to discuss what it means to be a non-binary. We need people to be more educated before we can start talking about the actual nuances of being transgender and non-binary and the relation between that. Have a seat. What happens in government world? In the world, your campaigns and your discussions will have to have prioritization as to what you discuss about. As a result of prioritization, both lose out. So your transgender movement doesn't have the capacity to gain full-on acceptance of what being a transgender is, simply because you have to talk about being non-binary. But also, on the flip of that, your non-binary groups also have less support and less capacity to talk about their issue. Because when they do, you take away from the ability for transgenders to speak. That prioritization means both sides lose out. Putting them in a movement will simply stuff the ability, stuff down their watch. But thirdly, we think discrimination of your non-binary people are far off in your world, because people who conform are now seen as people who are betraying the idea of transgenders. You want to get every aspect of being conforming, then you have to accept that that means you are saying it is a wrong thing to perform and it's a vague notion of conformity you have to defend. Sit down. But let's talk about opening. 3 things. Number one, societal discussions on transgenders and cis and trans individuals become easier and you get better help and better acceptance. This is completely false. Considering again that we are arguing on a premise that people cannot understand, your discussions now become more weight. But why is it worse off? Considering now speech, we told you that, and in Nimisha's speech, we told you that. Now all your discussions will be centered around either cis or trans, and that prioritization and a improper prioritization is likely to happen in your world means that your proper discussions cannot be held. We'd rather a world where you prioritize transgender movements and you prioritize the discussion surrounding them and gaining some form of basic acceptance that otherwise you will not have. When you complicate an issue, you make it significantly harder for any degree of acceptance. We have no discussion, we have no analysis from opening as to why discussion is better, considering your discussion is muddled, messy, and no prioritization openings.
How would you challenge the notion of gender binary? The only 2 identities you allow is either feminine female or strong masculine male.
Right, we are going to prioritize the fight for that. We think it's more important for transgenders to gain that acceptance first. But also, we've already proven to you in our Nimisha speech how you make that worse when you don't have the capacity to speak out. But more than that, we think these non-binary groups become more comfortable in this region, in their transgender movement. If they feel like they're already in this group, there's less political will for them to form their own movements and say their own discussions and have forums specifically targeting them. That is something you lose in your work. But secondly, this is weird, aid is limited, because this is exactly what our extension is. Considering that aid is already limited in this world, considering that discussions need to be had in prioritization, how does limited aid justify the need for them to come into this moment? We think it's, sit down, have a seat. We think it's far worse when you have limited aid and you overburden these individuals. In the end of discussions become wavered. We think there's an importance to try and bring up non-binary and have discussions about non-binary, when otherwise those forums and discussions should be about transgender rights. So on a net, we think that side loses, considering that side has lower aid and lower capacity to prioritize and help your cis and trans movements. We think your non-binary people are the ones who will always be left out first, considering that they are the ones who are joining transgenders. As a result, there's less of a capacity for people to speak up and say that we need non-binary groups, considering they're already supposedly being represented. As a result, your non-binary groups will never gain the sort of traction that needs to exist in society. We think it's far worse off when you push them to transgender groups where they feel like they're already being represented and they're not. But finally, let's not think about counseling being better. We think this is completely false thoughts by panel, we think it's important for counselling to specifically target the issue at hand. So while we think that you wanting to conform as a transgender is fine, you wanting to not conform is fine. The problem is that when you create a face of being a non-conformity, it means that if you conform, then you are seen as being a wrong sense of transgender. So now counts being a wrong transgender. As a result, your counselling is now catered to you, trying to make you understand why your conformity is wrong. And if you are a conforming transgender, you're viewed as wrong. Go with the side that helps you understand, and go with the side that realizes that stuffing up non-binaries in a woman that's already struggling for uphill fight is the wrong.
I think let's be this like our servant to shake hands first before wait out.
No,